Number 5 on this list is Torrid, a pretty clear indicator that someone is from an alternate dimension or parallel universe is if they claim to be from somewhere that doesn't exist. That's pretty much what happened a few years ago with a man in Japan. BuzzFeed says, allegedly this man told customs he was in Japan for business and had legitimate visa stamps, currency from multiple European countries, checks from an unknown bank, and a driver's license issued in Torrid. He was sent to a hotel while things were sorted out while 2 immigration officers stood outside of his hotel door. But when they went to check on him in the morning, he'd vanished. This was from 15 stories up above a busy street, so escaping through a window was very unlikely, if not impossible. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department searched but never located the man from Torrid. So many questions arise from a story like this. Where is Torrid? What did he need to do in Japan? Where did he go while he was being watched in the hotel, and how did he get out of there? Now that this guy disappeared, no one is gonna know the answer. I think the thing that I don't understand is if this guy wanted to keep his country secret, like he wanted to make sure that no one found out about it, then why did he show up to the airport with documents from that country? Like if he was traveling from another universe, he has to know that wouldn't have worked. And one has to imagine that he didn't want us to know his true identity because then he disappeared without telling anyone anything the next day. It all just seems super fishy and doesn't really add up. Unless he just screwed up super bad and picked up the wrong papers in the morning when he was traveling dimensions and coming to Japan. Oh, and okay, also another question. If he can move through dimensions and come into our universe and stuff, like why couldn't he have just warped into Japan? Like why did he need to use the airport? You'd think that air travel would be pretty archaic and unnecessary for a guy who just moved from, one universe to another one. Comment down below if you can think of any logical reasons as to why all of these things may have been the way that they were. I'm curious to hear what you guys can come up with.
In at number 4 we have Girls in the Desert. The story is about 4 girls that were going home after a Utah rodeo in May 1972. The mystery is still unsolved and the girls' names have been changed to protect their identities, but it's believed that 2 of them were sisters. The 3rd girl was a first cousin and the 4th girl was a cousin of one of the sisters. They were driving down Utah Highway 56 in the dark of night when they approached the Medina Railroad crossing and the headlights of their car lit up in a sharp fork in the road ahead. The rodeo that was located 180 miles from their university dorms in Pioche, Nevada, and they didn't want to be past curfew and be locked out of their dorm room, so they were willing to take a shortcut to be able to get home faster. The mysterious road curved sharply away from the main road toward the direction of the Gadianton Canyon in the distance. Legend claimed that beyond the canyon was a doorway to another world, an evil dimension of horror that the early Utah settlers avoided at all costs. Despite the rumors, the girls chose to take the shortcut, but after driving a while, the road suddenly ended at a towering rock wall. They became boxed in and had no choice to turn around and go back the way they'd come. They were trying to get back on the main road as they began to notice the landscape had drastically changed, and they had noticed a bright light off the roadway ahead. They had no idea where they were and didn't believe it to be Utah nor Nevada, and they desperately needed to find the highway again. They approached the light and they discovered it came from a sort of restaurant or roadhouse with a weird neon sign that seemed to be in another language. Once in the parking lot, they noticed very tall people started flooding out of the roadhouse towards the car, appearing angry at the girls' arrival. They were flailing their arms and screaming at the girls. The girls were frightened because they realized those things they saw were not human, and punched the gas to get away from the events happening at the roadhouse. They started to drive down the road and noticed something was following them. 4 freakish, egg-shaped vehicles with one large headlight were racing behind the car until they suddenly disappeared. The girls looked back and the entire road disappeared, and the car veered off the road and the engine died. The 4 girls were forced to sleep in the car, and in the morning they walked to Highway 56 and reported their incident to the police. The police investigated but were left with more questions than answers. The so-called roadhouse had never existed, and there were no tire tracks in the dirt, which was next to impossible. The story had baffled police and made many believe the 4 girls were taken break into a different world. In at number 3 we have the Green Children of Woolpit. One of the first stories of possible parallel universes comes from the story of the Green Children of Woolpit. It is a mysterious legend of 2 children with unusual skin colour who suddenly appeared in the village of Woolpit in Suffolk, England, sometime in the 12th century. The children were brother and sister and looked like normal humans beside their green coloured skin. They also spoke in an unknown language, wore unfamiliar clothing, and would only eat raw beans. After appearing out of nowhere, they were starting to live in this new life, and they began to eat other foods and lost their green colour, but soon after getting baptised, the boy became sickly and passed away. The girl continued adjusting to her new life and eventually learned how to speak English. She began to explain to the people of Woolpit that her and her brother came from St. Martin's Land, a subterranean world inhabited by green people. The girl explained that it was a place where the sun never shone, the light was like twilight, and everything there was the colour green. The children were unable to recall how they had gotten to Woolpit. They had been herding their father's cattle when they heard a loud noise and suddenly found themselves by the Woolpit where they were found. It is believed that this story could be a folktale describing an imaginary encounter with the inhabitants of another world, perhaps subterranean or extraterrestrial, or is indeed a real event. The story of the mysterious green children had been mentioned in many writings throughout history and even to this day, many believing they could be the first account of parallel universes or different dimensions. In at number 2 we have Lorena Garcia Gordo. A Spanish woman named Lorena Garcia Gordo posted a comment in an online forum asking for help, claiming to have woken up in a parallel universe. The morning of July 16, 2008, Lorena woke up in the morning and her bedsheets were a different colour. She was confused but got up and got ready for her office job that she was employed for the past 20 years. Thankfully, her car was parked in the same spot, so she continued her morning routine and drove to work. But then the mysteries continued when she arrived at her job. Inside the office building, she had seen some strange people she had never met before, and she walked towards her office. There was a different name tag on her office door that wasn't her name. She thought maybe she had gotten off on the wrong floor, but soon realized she was on the right one and connected her laptop to the company Wi-Fi. And her device was still on the company's rota, but she was under a different manager in a totally different department. Confused, she had to check her personal information and went through her ID, driver's license, and credit cards, but everything appeared normal. Lorena believed that these inconsistencies could be a result of a medical issue, so she took a sick day to investigate what was really going on with her. She went to the doctors immediately, but everything came back normal. She went home and double-checked bank statements and bills, but everything seemed to be the same as the night before, including the top news stories, yet her life was just slightly different. Things got weirder when she had tried calling her new boyfriend Augustine. She had separated from her boyfriend of 7 years recently, had been dating Augustine for the past 4 months. When Lorena called up her boyfriend, someone else answered and told her that no one by that name living in that home or that matched her descriptions of Augustine. It was as if Augustine had never existed, and Lorena soon learned she had never left her ex-boyfriend and they had been together since 7 years ago. There was no sign of them ever having separated. Lorena began to have several mental breakdowns and she visited a psychiatric clinic, but tests concluded she was of healthy body and mind. The doctors told her that maybe she was under a lot of stress, resulting in possibly hallucinating all of this. Days, weeks, and months passed with no answers, and these small inconsistencies continued. Lorena was convinced that she had simply went to bed one night and awoke in a parallel universe, a world in which her life had been altered by small decisions of her past. And finally, at number 1, we have the man from Torrid. The story starts off normal as any, at an airport in Tokyo in 1954. At the Haneda airport, it was business as usual when a European plane dropped off its passengers in Tokyo. As the crowd began to walk off the plane and make their way to customs, there was a neatly dressed, middle-aged, Caucasian man who walked up to officials, telling them it was just another normal business trip for him. He spoke primarily French, but was able to speak Japanese and other languages. He also possessed different European currencies in his wallet, clearly showing that he was a frequent flyer. When the officials asked for his country of origin, that's when it went from normal to strange. He casually stated that he was from Torrid, said to be on the border between France and Spain. The officials were confused and mentioned to the man that Torrid doesn't exist, and the man showed them his passport, and it was issued by the non-existent country of Torrid, which also showed visa stamps corroborating his previous business travels to Japan and other countries. The officials called the company this man was said to be having a meeting with. They'd never heard of him or his company ever before. The hotel he had reserved a room at had no reservation for such a person, and the bank listed on his checkbook didn't seem to exist. Custom officials brought out a world map and pointed to the tiny country of Andorra. Maybe that was his real country of origin, and somehow he was either mistaken mistaken or playing a joke on the people. The man became irritated and said that Andorra didn't exist, but it was right where Torrid should be, and stated his country has existed for thousands of years. The officials were all very confused, so the man was detained by customs and given a room at a nearby hotel for the night, while officials tried to figure out what was going on. The mystery deepened the following morning when the man had completely vanished from his hotel room, which had been guarded by immigration officials all night long. Not only that, but all of his personal documents, including his passport and driver's license, issued by the mysterious country, vanished from the airport security room. It was as if the entire thing never even happened. This story is still a mystery with no definitive answers and no documentations verifying the story has ever surfaced. So, stories like this make people believe there could be a time traveler, an alien, or someone from a parallel universe.
Kicking this list off, we have Frankenstein. Okay, not really the Dr. Frankenstein that we know and love, but the man who Mary Shelley based the novel off of, and around. Well, one of them at least. Mad scientists are still puzzled by the works of one Johann Conrad Dippel. Dippel was born at Castle Frankenstein in Germany, where he would attend university as a philosopher. He studied theology, philosophy, and alchemy at the University of Gießen, obtaining a master's degree in 1693. In the 1700s, he then turned to Hermetic studies and alchemy, and this is where it gets a little mad scientisty. There are claims that during his experiments at Castle Frankenstein, he practiced alchemy and anatomy at the same time, on both the living and the deceased. Yeah. Creepy. Dippel even said that the rumors were true that he had sold his soul to the devil in exchange for secret knowledge. Yeah, that'll do it. He had a huge reputation surrounding dark sorcery, specifically for his work around the Philosopher's Stone and his claim to fame, the elixir of life. He performed experiments with cadavers and attempted to transfer the soul of one to another. Yeah, he was obsessed with this idea of soul transference with barely and freshly dead people. Common experiments among alchemists at the time though. One night apparently while he was working with nitroglycerin and the effect on magnetism and electricity apparently led to the destruction and a huge explosion at Castle Frankenstein. It was this night that he apparently was messing around with lightning and the answer to all his ailments came to him. Local mythology and lore recounts huge explosions and lightning emitted from the castle that night. I guess this was a pretty infamous night. It seems like it's right out of the book, no? Apparently this was the night he acquired the knowledge behind creating the elixir of life, his pride and joy. So what exactly happened that night at Castle Frankenstein? Huge lightning storm, or was this guy opening portals looking for souls? You tell me.
Number 4 on this list is the Green Kids. So this one could be an argument for a parallel universe or for aliens. I'll let you guys be the judge. BuzzFeed says, back in the 12th century, 2 children, a brother and sister, allegedly popped up in the village of Woolpit in Suffolk, England. Both had greenish colored skin, spoke an unknown language, wore bizarre clothing, and initially refused to eat any food other than raw beans. They were taken in, cared for, and eventually they adapted, developing a taste for food and losing the green hue in their skin. Shortly after, the boy became sick and died, but after learning to speak English, the girl explained that she and her brother were from a place where the sun didn't shine bright and it was perpetually twilight. She and her brother were there herding their dad's cattle when they heard some loud noise and were suddenly in a new place where they were eventually discovered in Woolpit. The girl grew up and integrated herself into her new surroundings, though it remained unknown how she and her brother got there. The girl went on to get married and live her life here in a dimension that might not have actually been her place of origin. So, what are we thinking here, guys? Alien? Or alternate universe? I mean, when I hear green skin and unknown language, I automatically think alien, but I mean, I guess that could all be another dimension as well. That might also explain why they would have been okay with just staying here too. Anyways, comment down below what team you guys are on, Team Alien or Team Alternate Universe. Number 3 on this list is Joe Farvorin. This is a man who ended up being shipwrecked in Germany, but originally came from a completely unknown land. BuzzFeed says, so this story goes, a peculiar guy popped up in a village where he was picked up and questioned by authorities. The only comprehensible language he spoke was a broken variation of German, but he said his name was Joe Farvorin and claimed to come from a part of the world known as Sakria. He conveyed that he was searching for his long long-lost brother whom he'd been separated from during a shipwreck. While he had geographical information regarding his home planet, such as 5 compartments known as Sakria, Aflar, Aslar, Oslar, and Uplar, he couldn't trace his route on shore, and he would wind up living in Berlin, where he was a topic of discussion amongst the scientific and simply curious communities. This one seems like one of those stories where you get sucked into a whirlpool or something and then come out the other side in a totally different universe. I guess that's what happened here with Joe Farvorin. I must admit that I kind of feel bad for him if all this is true, because if all of this is true, then not only did you get sucked into another universe and are now forced to live here, but I don't think that you're ever gonna find your brother, bro. Stories like this should make you just a little bit more aware on that next fishing trip, I think. Number 2 on this list is the wrong turn. Imagine taking a wrong turn and ending up in an entirely different universe. That may have been what happened in this next story. BuzzFeed says the ladies had been driving on black asphalt in the desert, but after taking a wrong turn, they said they found themselves driving on white cement surrounded by grain field and a lake. They spotted a building with a large neon sign making up illegible random squiggles, and as they pulled in for assistance, a large group of tall men poured out of the front door, seeming shocked and upset, waving their arms at the girls. Then the girls realized these tall men didn't even appear to be human, so they freaked out and drove off. While the girls were driving away, they noticed 4 peculiar egg-shaped automobiles mounted on tricycle-style wheels, and they were following them. They sped ahead until the mysterious vehicles were out of sight, and when they reached the canyon and drove all the way back through it, they'd somehow returned to the desert they were originally in, glad to be back, but unable to figure out the mysterious place that they'd just gone or how they arrived there. So how the heck did that all happen? Also, they didn't mention it in the story, but what desert and what canyon is this in? This is seriously dangerous if all of this is true. I don't want to be driving through a canyon late at night and then just appear in another universe. Especially not a universe that has a bunch of super tall alien dudes chasing me around in eggmobiles. The girls who went there swear what they claim is true, so just be aware if you're driving out late at night. And number 1 on this list is the band breakup. The Beatles, one of the greatest bands to ever create music, literally ever. They were incredible, and the thought of them making any more music together is just so intriguing. Apparently, in another universe, they did just that. BuzzFeed says in 2009, a man named James Richards was in Livermore, California, driving home from Turlock with his dog. He claims that when he pulled over to let the pup empty her bladder, she sprinted after a rabbit and he followed after her, but tripped, knocking himself unconscious. When James came to, he was next to an odd machine in the company of a man named Jonas, who claimed to have found his unconscious body while on a work trip for an interdimensional travel agency. While they were together, Jonas and Richards wound up chatting about the pop culture in their respective universes and discovered that not only did the Beatles also exist in this dimension, but they were all still alive and actively making music. Richards acquired a cassette tape labeled Everyday Chemistry, which contained Beatles songs that never existed in our dimension. He even uploaded the songs to a website and called it the BeatlesNeverBrokeUp.com. So if there's a universe where there are more Beatles albums, then sign me up, dude. This also opens the door to so many cool universes out there as well. Like, there's definitely a universe out there where the only thing that's different is like Dunkaroos never got discontinued. And you know, let's face it, that's the universe that I think we all should want to live in.
In at number 5 we have Carol Chase Mcleaney. This story is about Carol Chase Mcleaney and starts as she drove through San Bernardino, California, heading to Perris, California for a dog show. She topped a hill south of the city and saw a road sign for nearby Riverside. Carol's family's roots were put down in Riverside in the early 1800s, and she wanted to visit familiar places like her old house and the cemetery where her grandparents are buried. She drove through Riverside and onto Perris, where she checked into a hotel to attend a dog show for the weekend. The next day, Carol went to the dog show and then drove to Riverside to check things out from her past, but nothing was familiar. Her old street wasn't the same. She couldn't find her childhood home. Confused, she went on to go and see if she could find her grandmother's old house, but when she drove into the neighborhood, she was amazed everything was different. None of the houses were anything like she remembered, and her grandma's house and aunt and uncle's house next door was simply gone. Carol made her way to the cemetery, but just like the houses, there was no sign of a cemetery or one ever being there. She drove around the block, the area was just fenced off with weeds inside, no gate, driveway, nothing. Carol drove away very confused and tried to find something familiar. She recognized the college and middle school and it seemed right, but the things were marked differently. University Avenue was a main drag and there were scary looking people around, and the area she grew up in before had restaurants, banks and motels, but is now graffitied up and deserted. She had a very strange feeling, so she got out of there. Carol believed if she had gotten out of the car something weird would happen, or if she talked to anyone around the area that she would be stuck in this weird version of the other Riverside, or that these people weren't going to be human. After a few confusing hours, Carol returned to her hotel and everything seemed to be as normal as before she left. A few years later, Carol's father passed away and was buried at the same cemetery where her grandparents were, and the once emptied, fenced-off, weeded lot was back to normal, and the city looked like it did when she lived there in the 70s. No one knows what happened to Carol that day, not even her, but she believes she slid into another dimension that day, one that was not a friendly place.
Number 4. Electro. Okay, they were definitely onto something back then. Lots of magnets and souls and electricity going on. It's 1803. Giovanni Aldini was an Italian physician and physicist born in Bologna, Italy. He, just like the other Dr. Frankenstein, liked to conduct high amounts of electricity through corpses to see what they could do. Yeah, sinister stuff. But science, you know? They like to do these crazy experiments and then write it down and stuff. Lab coats, you know. I have a weak stomach, I could never have sat through these experiments. Since electricity was relatively new at the time, all these zany ideas from these mad scientists multiplied the more playing around with it. Soon, it became otherworldly. The obsession around electricity, magnets, souls, other realms, they were hypothesizing leading to some pretty evil stuff. In 1803, the fresh body of a murderer was pulled down from the gallows of Newgate Prison in London and taken to the Royal College of Surgeons for experimenting. There, before an audience of doctors and physicists, Giovanni attempted to breach realms and return the corpse from beyond the grave. Ooh, okay. Homemade batteries and magnets was used, which made the deceased muscles contort aggressively, and apparently his eyes even opened, looking around the room. Giovanni then stuck the rod where the sun don't shine, then made the whole body start to move about as if it had come to life. For years, he was the leading scientist in electricity and its effect on the body. Apparently, some claim that Aldini would even experiment on himself, pushing the limits and dialing up the voltage. Dude, this guy's Electro from Spider-Man. In recognition of his merits, the Emperor of Austria made him a Knight of the Iron Crown and died not many years later. And although he was unsuccessful at bringing souls back from the dead using electricity, I'm sure this guy experienced more than he shared. I wonder who has his journal. Number 3. No, I'm Spartacus. Actually, much more evil than him. Heinrich Mueller. Born in Munich, Germany, April 1900. After serving as a pilot in World War I, he joined the police in Munich, soon acquiring a reputation as a skilled investigator. As such, he would draw the attention of two nastier men, Heinrich H. and Reinhard H., leaders of the German SS army. Yeah, I don't even like saying their full names out loud. Just Google them up, you'll know. Mueller entered the SS in 1934 and quickly rose through the ranks of the organization as a police official. In 1939, when the Gestapo police force and the other organizations joined the Reich, Mueller was made head honcho. Yeah, basically this guy was like next in charge to you know who. He was a pretty scary and powerful guy. Mueller was involved in a ton of criminal affairs. He helped plan the Polish attack, he signed the Bullet Order, he authorized the torture of officers who had conspired to kill other SS soldiers. People knew him, and knew of him. He was, unfortunately, infamous and a huge deal. This is the weird part. When the Allies moved in and they arrested him, the man turned out to be another Mueller. Okay. In fact, they couldn't find the Heinrich Mueller, instead arresting many others of the same name. The head of the Gestapo wanted for crimes against humanity had vanished without even a trace. Gone. Even the CIA were like, okay, where the hell did this guy just go? He was just right here. He apparently vanished in the last days of the war. The Western Secret Services started many investigations over the years, but Mueller and the vast majority of the Gestapo secret files were never found. In 2001, the CIA reopened its archives about the SS war criminal and revealed it still knew nothing new or conclusive about the SS Heinrich Mueller who had been in charge all those years ago. Where did this guy vanish to? I don't know. Number 2, us. Sure, I've had my fair share of sibling rivalry. One's better at this, one's better at that. But these siblings took it to a whole other realm. The Han twins, or as I like to call it, the story of good versus evil. A tale as old as time. Well, not that long ago, actually. During the 90s, this was a huge case plastered on every screen of the attempted murder of Sunny Han by her identical twin sister, Gina Han. Whoa. It's November 6, 1996 in California. It quickly became a jaw-dropping case in the media as the case touched on themes of broken families, sister rivalry, split personas, and of course, parallel universes. The sisters had always had disagreements, but apparently hatred became obsession. Throwing some hands here and there became stalking, and eventually jail time. The older they got, the more things escalated. Gina, after escaping prison, had drummed up the idea to hire 2 teenagers to kidnap her sister. Uh-oh. During the kidnapping, the plan, however, failed, and the 2 men were quickly taken into custody by police. Just before going to Sunny's apartment, they went to buy large garbage bags, duct tape, wine, gloves, Pine Sol cleaner, and magazines. Yeah. The police were notified and luckily reached them before Sunny's evil plan could commence, and it was a close one. They, including the evil sister, were locked and loaded. Literally. Scary. Yeah, as in she literally dodged a bullet on that one. This is like the Metal Mario version of yourself, isn't it? This is terrifying. Do you even think you could take an evil version of yourself? It's sad that it's family, you know? The jury reached their verdict as to each defendant on November 20th, 1997, and Han was convicted of all charges, which were 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder, 2 counts of burglary, 2 counts of false imprisonment, and 1 count of possession of a weapon. So why did she hate her sister so much? How come she wanted to take over her life and just live one? This has evil parallel universe written all over it, dude. And number 1, the gods. Peru contains its fair share of ancient megalithic ruins. I'll do it again, sorry. Peru contains its fair share of ancient megalithic ruins. If you're not familiar with the construction and myths behind the Machu Picchu and the Nazca lines, then this next one may make you scratch your head. Some would say those are cute compared to this next rock? I don't know. The door in Hayumarca, some think it's a wall, but most believe it becomes a portal to the beyond. The story of the Gate of the Gods, also known as Door of Hayumarca, begins near the banks of the Titicaca over half a millennium ago. According to Incan legend, the universe began here, and according to researchers, the Incan Empire fell here, somewhere around 1592. Peruvians tell the tale of an Incan priest who barely escaped slaughter from the conquistador forces. His name was Aramu Muru, and he was a powerful high priest who served in the Temple of the Seven Rays. To escape his imminent death at the hands of the Spanish army, Muru fled to Hayumarca with the help of other priests, and using a golden disc key, Muru opened the small door in the face of the rock, apparently venturing into another realm. According to legend, the stone door transformed into a bright tunnel that was lit with an unearthly blue light. Aramu Muru passed through the barrier and entered the void, upon which the door then closed behind him. Spooky. Many people believe that he is now living in the land of the gods. Many still believe he is to return with the knowledge of the other side. I mean, if this guy just like platform 9 3/4'd himself through a perfectly sanded rock face, yeah, I'm gonna say it's ancient aliens. Right away, 100%. This site's also been said to be aligned by 5 other archaeological sites which together form an imaginary cross with straight lines crossing each other exactly at the point where this plateau and lake are located. That makes it even creepier.